Hello there. My name is Larry, and today I'd like to talk about movies. Whether you prefer action, romance, horror, or comedies, movies constantly try to draw a viewer in. The goal of most films is to get you to empathize with the characters on screen, to get you invested in a story. But whose stories? And stories about what? Well, for the most part, it has been men's stories, about men, or at the very least, the male perspective. This leads men to be portrayed as heroes. They're competent, confident, and have all the agency they need to drive the plot forward. But where does that leave women? How are they portrayed in film? And what qualities are conveyed by how their gender is expressed on the big screen? This video seeks to examine those stories. Here's our agenda. We'll go over some stereotypical roles women have played in the past. We'll talk about the Bechdel test and the goals behind its conception, and then we'll investigate the Bechdel test in greater detail. Finally, we'll look at some alternative gender equality tests for films and movies. Let's establish the importance of this topic. We're talking about movies, so it's less concrete than some other sociological topics. In other words, what's at stake here? In Turin University's 2023 paper, Gender and Media Representations, the author, Trombetta, highlights that women are portrayed negatively in three key ways. Firstly, stereotypical portrayals show women focused primarily on their appearance and their social relationships with men. They are also commonly restricted to roles such as the love interest or damsel in distress. Secondly, objectifying portrayals treat women like decoration rather than fully dimensional people. Lastly, sexualized portrayals of women have been linked to deeper held sexist belief in both men and women, and more common acceptance of sexual violence in men. Trombetta summarizes his findings. Consistent empirical evidence highlights the importance of media representations as a key part of sociological influences that may have consequences on well-being. Exposure to stereotyping, objectifying, and sexualized representations appears to consistently be linked to negative consequences on physical and mental health, as well as fostering sexism, violence, and gender inequality. He continues, both skewed representation and presence of stereotypes have been found to lead to several negative effects. Gender unequal representation has been found to stifle political and career ambition, as well as foster organizational discrimination. Heavy media use may further the belief in gender stereotypes and has been found to be linked to a stronger endorsement of traditional gender roles and norms, which in turn may be linked to a vast number of detrimental health effects. In women, adherence and internalization of gender roles in a traditional fashion have been linked to greater symptoms of depression and anxiety, a higher likelihood of developing eating disorders, lower self-esteem, and lower self-efficacy. Now that we've established the negative effects of stereotypical portrayals, how can we spot these roles being played out on the screen? One simple and quick method is the Bechdel test. Proposed by American comic artist Alison Bechdel in 1985, the test has three simple components. 1. Two female characters with names must 2. Have at least one conversation about 3. Something other than a man. It was originally proposed by Bechdel to expose media gender bias. The question I intended to investigate for this video was originally, has Hollywood's pass rate of the Bechdel test gone up? To show whether or not film is becoming more equal in gender representation. To this end, I looked at a list of films that passed and failed the Bechdel test over 5-year increments. Looking over 2013, 2018, and 2023, surprisingly, all 3 years have a nearly identical pass rate of about 70%. So why is that? This led me to my second question, and a great thesis from Kathrine Gray at Portland State University in 2019. In her paper, Kathrine highlights that the Bechdel test was always a low bar. She does this through a survey where she questions participants after watching one of 2 scenes at random. One scene passes the test and the other fails. After viewing, participants took surveys and gave impressions in 2 major areas. First, they rated how pleasing and irritating, feminist to anti-feminist, and progressive to traditional the scenes were, to establish a quote-unquote progressiveness score. Then surveys ask participants to rate the scene versus ethical and unethical, acceptable versus unacceptable to me and my family, and morally right versus morally wrong to establish a acceptability score. Several other sex, gender, and demographic questions were posed, but for the sake of time, we'll zero in on these two. Across all tested criteria, the Bechdel test gave no clear indicator of how female characters would be portrayed. Both scenes rated practically the same. In her discussion, Miss Gray notes that the Bechdel test does not relate to depth of character or identify any qualities women in film might display short of having names in one conversation. She continues that there should be more criteria added to the Bechdel test, and that more tests like it should be developed and shared. More indicators like this would not only help writers create more progressive stories, but help viewers identify when women are being sidelined in a film, and by extension, being sidelined by an audience. There are, as Miss Gray suggests, more litmus tests available for gender dynamics in film. The sexy lamp test, for example, states that if a female character can be replaced by a sexy lamp, then that character is poorly written and contributes to inferior female stereotypes. Here are a few examples of characters that fail that test. There's Severine from Skyfall in 2012 and Michaela from the Transformers movie in 2007. Another, more demanding test is the Mako-Mori test, which has the bold criteria of a female character who must have her own narrative arc that does not support a man's narrative arc. This test was proposed after Pacific Rim presented a story with a strongly written and well-defined character named Mako-Mori as a leading lady. Pacific Rim fails the Bechdel test, but it gives substantial screen time to Mako and her narrative arc, so many fans consider the movie a very progressive depiction. Tying everything together, these tests aren't foolproof, and they shouldn't be the gold standard for gender depiction in film. Many people have said this about all three tests we've gone over. These tests ideally serve as tools in a toolbox for identifying when a show or movie isn't presenting a woman on screen and is instead just showing you a sexy lamp. Seeing the lamps in stories might in turn help you identify stereotypes you accidentally carry out of the theater and into your life. Thank you for watching. My name is Larry again, and I hope you have a wonderful day.